Hey everyone, welcome and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be showing you how I sketch and paint this minimalistic cafe in Penang called Unknown. So these are the materials that I will be using, very minimal, nothing fancy, and as usual, the links to these materials are down in the video description below. I will also be talking about these materials as I use them throughout this video. So this is the reference photo, and I think this cafe is really beautiful yet really simple. It has very clean lines and you can notice the very nice shadows, and I think it has just enough details to make it interesting. So this is a great subject for those of you who are looking for something which is less complicated to sketch, or for someone who is a beginner. So if you want, you can download this picture, which I took myself, on my Ko-Fi page, along with the line work of this piece. I will be using this Lamy Safari fountain pen with a medium nib and black Noodler's bulletproof ink. So you can use any waterproof pen that you like, as long as you make sure that the ink is water resistant or waterproof. I'm using my sketchbook, which is quite small. It's smaller than A5 size, so it's about 17 by 11 centimeters. And because we are drawing essentially two buildings connected together, it's going to look pretty small. So always use watercolor paper. Normal paper does not work well with watercolor at all. Always use something that is designed for watercolor. So for this subject, we're going to draw the main building on the right first. So that main building is, it should look a little bigger than the one on the left side. So here you can see that I'm starting with those few dots to indicate how wide this building will be and the rough location of where I want these lines to end. So as you can see, I started with that rectangle on the top, and then I proceed downwards from that point. So it's useful to think in terms of shapes and lines, instead of thinking that this is a window, or this is a door, or this is a roof. When you think of them as just shapes connected to each other, it becomes simple. As you can see, I'm drawing a lot of broken or even dotted lines. So I'm purposely not making the lines sort of straight and solid. I'm sort of letting my hand go a little freely to create these crooked lines, sort of organic looking lines. And it might look a little odd now, but when all the lines come together, at the end, what people see is the overall shape and not each individual line. So what people will see as a whole is something that we want to focus on. And another important point, I'm changing the perspective for this piece so that we're viewing it straight on, instead of at an angle like in the photo. So I'm not following the reference photo exactly, and the point of this is not accuracy, but rather to capture an impression of the scene that we have right here. So right now, so far, we have a lot of rectangles, just everything really simple. And we're dividing up that top section into 3, and the middle window is a bit wider than the 2 on the sides. So it's really very simple concepts. The important part is to make it look fun and to make it look loose. And I think that those wonky lines, those sort of crooked windows, they help to bring some character into your piece. Of course, everyone has a different preference, and everyone who does this is going to have a different result. And that is the fun, and that is the joy of loose sketching. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to let your hand do what it wants and just try and make something that you like. If you struggle to sketch looser or to let go, one tip is to make each stroke a little faster so that it looks like it's more confident and you have more confident strokes. And this, of course, takes some practice. And at the same time, although the lines might be a little crooked, you still need to maintain the underlying structure and shapes. And of course, some people are naturally slower or faster, and that doesn't matter. You compare yourself to yourself. So if you are at this speed now, take your own speed and adjust it either faster or slower and just see what happens. So now we have come to the bottom half, and I just drew that door in the center, and now we have a square for that window. Very simple. So we can't see because of the car, but I'm going to add some stools right there below that window. And I'm going to exclude the cars from the sketch, but feel free to sketch them if you like. So I always get cars sort of blocking my view, so I do reference other pictures if I can to fill in the missing details. So for a cafe like this, you can find other references very easily just by Googling the place. And another option is, of course, to draw on location, so you can view it from multiple angles. So here I am adding some smaller details, and it's up to you to add or subtract any of these details. But the details do matter, but focus on the big picture first before adding all the little details. So right now I'm sketching that plant in the center, and we can't see much of it from that photo, but that's okay. You can use your imagination. And this building has very clean, simple lines. It has not much texture, so I'm going to be adding more looseness and more movement with the lines on this plant. So that just sort of balances everything out a little bit. Now we're moving on to the second building, which is like an extension of the main building. So I started with a little dot to indicate roughly where the lines should go. And that dot helps me to sort of get the width right and to get the angle right as well. And on a big white piece of paper, little dots like that do give us somewhere to aim towards. And you can see that I am stopping midway right here because we have that umbrella in front. And a little thing that I like to do with umbrellas is to sort of exaggerate the angles a little bit. So if you have been here for a while and you have been watching a lot of my videos, you know that I sometimes start with watercolor first instead of with a pen, like I'm doing today. So why did I not start with watercolor for this piece? So very simply, I really can't paint those white shapes with watercolor. And with watercolor, you don't actually paint with white. You let the white of the paper show through. So starting with watercolor would have been difficult for this one. Here I'm drawing those poles and those string lights, and these elements do add quite a lot of interest to this piece as a whole. And as I am drawing, I am referencing the lines which are already there on the page. So everything is relative. These are all just shapes and lines, and we are figuring out how they connect and relate with each other. Alright, so we are almost done, and now I'm just adding some little details, maybe filling up the empty spaces with a little texture and more lines. Also going to write those words on the awning. So we're spending quite a lot of time on these outlines here, and this is a real-time video. None of it is sped up if you haven't already noticed. So you can sketch along with me if you like. And finally, I'm going to outline the name of the cafe. So these are really big letters, but the words need to be spaced out really nicely in this space. So whenever in doubt, you can always use a pencil first. And so this first round, I think the spacing was slightly off. So I need the words to be really in the center of this signboard. So the words were skewed to the left right here. And so I decided to rub it out, and I moved the words a fraction to the right so that it's more centered. If you prefer, you can always use a pencil to do a rough sketch of this whole thing, this whole building, before doing the pen outlines. But for a simple building like this, the spacings aren't too hard to estimate, and if you get it slightly skewed or inaccurate, it doesn't really affect the piece that much. But for words, I find that words have to be spaced evenly, so I tend to use a pencil first. Alright, so we are done with the inking, and for the next part we're going to be painting with watercolor, and it will be more simple and quick. Here I'm loading the brush with the first color, which is burnt sienna, and I'm going to be painting all the wood colored areas. So the brush that I'm using is the Princeton Aqua Elite size 6, and it's a synthetic brush. And the watercolors that I'm using are in a box, a little box. So it's actually called the Cotman Sketchers Pocket Box, and it's by Winsor & Newton. I also have a video out on this box. So if you want to know more about it, you can go and watch that video. So this box has only a few colors, but it's definitely more than enough to paint this piece right here. So right now I'm just using that first color to paint in all the areas that need that color. So if the first layer dries and you find it too light, you can go over it a second time and add a second layer to make the color more saturated. So watercolor does dry lighter than when it was wet. So it does take some amount of practice and time to know how much paint to apply on the page. Now for the second color, I want a sort of pastel color for the awning. So I want a sort of pale brown color. So I'm mixing a little bit of white into that burnt sienna. So for this wall, I dabbed on some wet paint first, and then I dipped my brush in water, in clean water. And then I came back to smoothen out or soften those edges of those strokes and to sort of pull the paint outwards. So this creates a sort of gradient. The third color that we're going to use is a mixture of sap green and yellow ochre. So we're going to be painting in all the greens. So for this light green, I'm making sure to use a lot of paint and water so that it stays wet for longer on the page. So before that paint dries, I'm then dabbing in some more sap green to darken some areas. The fourth color, we're going to be using a mixture of cerulean blue and ultramarine. So for these windows, I am just dabbing in the light blue paint first, leaving a lot of white space. And then after that, I come in with a little bit of ultramarine added onto that same brush, and then I fill in the rest of the spaces. So this lets the paint sort of blend on the page and creates some nice variations. I also like to leave little spots unpainted. So these little tiny spots, they will look like highlights on that window. So right here, I am mixing some burnt sienna into that blue mix that we had and that we've been using earlier. So this will create a sort of grayish color, grayish black color, and I'm going to be using this color to paint in the shadows. So for something that is mostly white, like this building right here, the shadows are a very important part of this piece. It really starts to bring this piece to life and gives it volume and contrast. It's also worth noting again that I am not following this reference photo exactly, so I am making the shadows slant more towards the right side. So the light source seems to be coming from the top left, which is different from the reference. Alright, so we are done with the lighter shadows, and now I'm using a darker gray, which is basically more of the same mix, just with a greater concentration of paint. So I'm painting those letters as well as some darker areas. We are almost done. All that's left is to add some splatters of paint. So there are no rules, just use all the same colors as before and have fun. So all in all, this was a really fun little piece. Simple, but I enjoyed it a lot. And when you do or see a lot of complicated things, sometimes it's so nice to go back to the simple things and to appreciate the beauty in simplicity. I hope this video was helpful to you, and if you did find it helpful, do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if you sketched along with me and if you have any suggestions for future videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.